They pushed me out of the house on the night I graduated. They told me I would never become anything important in life. Those words hurt so deeply that it felt like the girl I used to be broke apart at that moment. One part of me stayed behind with the pain, and the other part became the woman I would grow into later. I left that night with only one suitcase. My graduation gown was wet from the rain, and my eyes were full of tears. But before I walked away, I made a promise to myself. I whispered quietly, "Just survive for now. One day you will rise." 11 years passed after that night. One evening, I walked into my sister's wedding. The moment I stepped inside the ballroom, it felt like the whole room froze. People didn't completely stop talking, but something changed. It was like a soft wind moved through the room, and everyone felt it at the same time. My sister's husband looked at me, then looked at her. He seemed confused. "Do you two know each other?" he asked. I gave a calm smile. But the real surprise was not his question. The real surprise was the way my family reacted. Their faces changed quickly. It looked like they had just seen something they hoped would never come back. It was as if I had returned holding a secret they didn't want anyone to know. Many people talk about their childhood like it is a warm and happy place. They think about it when life becomes difficult. They imagine going back to that place for comfort. But my childhood did not feel warm. For me, it felt like a long, narrow hallway. The hallway echoed when you walked through it. There were many doors along the walls, but almost all of them opened only for my younger sister, Althea. If you have ever been the responsible one in a family, you might understand what I mean. From a young age, I learned certain things very quickly. I learned that staying quiet kept everyone calm. I learned that stepping aside made things easier for others. And I learned that love in our house came with many hidden rules. The problem was that those rules were so small you couldn't see them clearly. You only noticed them the moment you broke one. My father, Magnus, owned a family clinic in the city. He was a doctor and carried himself with great pride. When he spoke, he sounded very confident, like every opinion he had was always correct. My mother, Mirabelle, believed everything he said. She repeated his ideas and thoughts as if they were the only truth in the world. And then there was Althea. Althea understood very early that being the favorite child was almost like a job. She played that role perfectly. She spoke in a soft voice. She looked at people with wide, innocent eyes. And she knew exactly when to act helpless, so everyone around her would rush to help. I remember many evenings when I was a teenager. I would stand quietly in the hallway and watch my parents with Althea. My father would sit beside her at the table and help her with her homework. My mother would carefully fix Althea's hair before her piano recital. They both looked so proud of her. At the same time, I would stand there with my backpack still on my shoulders. Inside that backpack were report cards filled with straight A's. But no one ever asked to see them. At first, you try to tell yourself it doesn't matter. You pretend that you don't care. But deep inside, small cracks begin to form in your heart. Those cracks grow slowly and quietly over time. Even during those years, I worked hard. After school, I had small jobs. On weekends, I worked extra hours wherever I could. I saved every bit of money I earned. I kept that money inside a little tin box under my bed. That box meant something very special to me. It meant freedom. It meant hope. It meant one day I could leave and build a better life. One afternoon, I received my college acceptance letter. I remember standing in the parking lot behind the grocery store where I worked stocking shelves. When I opened the envelope and saw the letter, tears filled my eyes. I cried right there in the parking lot. When Althea received her acceptance letter later, our house filled with balloons. There was a cake on the table and a big family dinner. Everyone celebrated her. I quietly told myself it was fine. I reminded myself that life is not always fair. Some people receive more love and attention, and some people simply learn to live without it. Years passed and life slowly changed. During that time, Adrian came into my life. I was working the night desk at a hospital then. Whenever I had a free moment, I studied between helping patients and answering phone calls. Adrian was a young doctor who was still in training. He was smart, but more importantly, he was kind. He noticed little things about me that other people ignored. He noticed when I had forgotten to eat. He noticed when I had fallen asleep with my head resting on my books. He didn't ask many questions about my family in the beginning. Maybe he could sense that my past was something I kept locked away behind a heavy door. Later, Atlas came into our lives. Our little boy brought so much happiness into the world. He was full of laughter, messy hands, and endless curiosity. Every time he smiled, it reminded me that I could create a better life than the one I grew up in. For many years, I stayed away from anything connected to the Hart family name. I avoided family photos. I skipped holiday gatherings. I even avoided the street where the family clinic stood. But one day, a wedding invitation arrived in the mail. It was Althea's wedding invitation. I held the envelope in my hands for a long time. It felt heavier than it should have. I wasn't sure why. It wasn't because I wanted to see my family again. But something inside me knew that opening that envelope meant opening a door I had kept closed for more than 10 years. So 11 years after the night they forced me out, I walked into my sister's wedding. The ballroom looked beautiful, but it also felt strange to me. Bright chandeliers hung from the ceiling and spread golden light across the marble floors. Guests dressed in elegant clothes moved around the room like they belonged inside a fancy magazine photo. I stood near the entrance for a moment. I gently smoothed the front of my dress and took a slow breath. Adrian placed a comforting hand on my back. Atlas held my fingers and looked around the room with excitement. "Mom," he whispered, "do we know anyone here?" In my mind I answered, "Only ghosts." We began walking forward. People continued talking, but their voices softened. Some guests turned their heads. Others stared quietly. Recognition slowly spread across the room. A few doctors stopped speaking when they noticed my name written on the place cards. I was used to people reacting to my name at work, but not here. Not at a wedding where my own family once said I would never succeed. Althea was the first person in my family to notice me. She turned toward me and froze. Her face showed the same expression I remembered from childhood. First surprise, then quick thinking, and finally panic. Her white wedding dress sparkled under the lights, but her shoulders became stiff. The smile she tried to form looked weak and unsteady. "Arden," she said quietly. Behind her, my parents stopped moving. My father Magnus clenched his jaw tightly. My mother Mirabelle reached for her necklace, something she always did whenever she felt shocked or nervous. Why are you here?" my mother whispered. I lifted the invitation slightly. "I was invited," I said. Before anyone could say another word, a man stepped forward beside Althea. He was tall and confident, with the calm expression of someone used to making serious decisions. This was Augustine, the groom. He studied my face carefully, almost like a doctor studying a patient. Then his eyes moved to the small name badge on my clutch. Something changed in his expression. He looked back and forth between me and my family. "Do you two know each other?" he asked. His question seemed to echo softly around us. Althea became completely still. My parents looked pale. Nearby guests slowed their steps, pretending not to listen while clearly listening to every word. I felt a small ache inside my chest. For a moment, I remembered the rain from that night long ago. I remembered the sound of the door slamming behind me. I remembered the harsh words that followed me into the dark. But the pain did not control me anymore. Underneath that memory was something stronger. It was the strength of the woman I had become. So I smiled. Augustine blinked, confused. Althea's fingers twisted nervously in the fabric of her dress. My mother looked like she wanted to stop the conversation, but didn't know how. Adrian leaned closer to me. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I'm fine," I replied. And for the first time in many years, that answer was completely true. Althea tried to save the situation quickly. She laughed in a shaky way. "We just haven't seen each other in a long time," she said while holding Augustine's arm tightly. But Augustine did not look convinced. Instead, he continued studying me with curiosity. "Your last name is Hart," he said slowly. "So is hers. But she never told me about you." "She doesn't like talking about the past," my mother quickly said. "Today is a happy day. Let's focus on that." But her voice trembled slightly. Augustine noticed. He turned back to Althea with a serious look. "Why didn't you tell me you had an older sister?" Althea struggled to answer. It just never came up," she finally said. The weak explanation floated in the air. Adrian gently squeezed my hand. I didn't need revenge. The truth was already doing its work. A waiter walked past carrying a tray of champagne glasses. I picked one up and held the cool glass while watching my family. They looked uncomfortable. For more than 10 years they had hidden a story. Now that story is slowly coming out. Finally, my father stepped forward. "Arden," he said quietly. "I don't know what you're trying to do, but this isn't the place." For a moment, the old feeling tried to return. The feeling that told me to stay quiet and make myself small. But that feeling quickly faded. "I'm not trying to do anything," I said calmly. "I'm just attending the wedding I was invited to." My father looked angry for a moment. Then he noticed Augustine watching him and quickly forced a smile. "Let's all calm down," Augustine said carefully. I'm just surprised. Althea told me she managed the family clinic alone for years. She said her parents depended on her, and that she was the only one who stayed. I raised my eyebrows slightly. Is that what she said? Althea's face became pale. People nearby leaned closer, whispering quietly. Atlas tugged on my dress. Mom, can I get a cake now? He asked. Soon, I whispered. Althea stepped closer to me and spoke quietly. Why are you doing this? Why come now? I didn't know I needed your permission, I answered. Her eyes filled with fear. Moments later, she rushed down the hallway in her high heels. My mother quickly followed her. My father stayed for a moment, glaring at me. But all I had done was walk through the door. Adrian leaned toward me. She's falling apart, he whispered. No, I said softly. She's revealing the truth. After a moment, I walked toward the restroom hallway. Inside, I felt something change. I was no longer that scared 18-year-old girl standing in the rain. I was someone stronger now. Someone they should have been afraid to lose. When I reached the restroom hallway, I saw Althea standing by the marble counter. She held it tightly as if the room were spinning. Her reflection in the mirror looked fragile. Her eyes were wide, and her breathing was fast. Althea looked very scared when she saw me. It was the kind of fear that you cannot hide with makeup, pretty hair, or shiny jewelry. Her eyes grew wide, and for a moment she looked like she had forgotten how to breathe. When she noticed me standing there, her shoulders quickly straightened, as if she was trying to look strong and confident again. You had no right to come here, she whispered. Her voice was quiet, but it was shaking. I was invited, I answered calmly. Your husband invited me. Her jaw became tight, and she looked angry. Augustine doesn't know everything, she said. I'm starting to understand that, I replied softly. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. We just stood there looking at each other. From the ballroom nearby, soft music was playing. The music sounded sweet and romantic. People were laughing and celebrating inside. But the moment between us felt very heavy and uncomfortable. Althea suddenly spoke again, her voice full of anger. Why now? She asked. Why today of all days? Couldn't you let me have just this one moment? I didn't come here to ruin anything, I said quietly. I only came because I was invited. What happens after this is not something I planned. Her eyes flashed with anger again. But behind that anger, I could see something else. I could see fear. He can't find out, she whispered quickly. You don't understand. I understand more than you think, I answered. She flinched slightly when I said that. I understood the lies that had been told about me for many years. I understood the story she had told everyone. She told people that I left school because I was weak. She said I was unstable. She told everyone that she carried the family's problems by herself. But the truth was very different. While people believed those lies, Althea had been living a life built on the chances that were taken away from me. She was enjoying opportunities that should have been mine. Althea, I said gently, you cannot build a life on a fake story about me. She quickly reached out and grabbed my arm. Please, she begged quietly. Don't say anything out there. Please don't ruin this day. I gently moved her hand away from my arm. I haven't said anything, I told her calmly. And somehow, that seemed to scare her even more. We walked back toward the ballroom together. When we entered the room again, I could feel that the mood had changed. Some people stopped talking when we passed by. Others looked at us curiously. Near the main table, my parents were standing close to Augustine. They were whispering to him quickly. Augustine looked confused and worried. Just then, Adrian walked toward me. He was holding Atlas on his hip. People are starting to ask questions, Adrian said quietly. Let them ask, I replied calmly. We walked back to our table and sat down. At that moment, a doctor from one of the big hospitals came over to greet Augustine. He smiled warmly and shook Augustine's hand. Then the doctor turned to Althea. You worked at your family's clinic for many years, right? The doctor asked kindly. Althea stood up straight and forced a bright smile. Oh yes, she said cheerfully. I've been managing everything there since I finished college. The doctor nodded politely. And where did you study again? He asked. Augustine once mentioned Stanford. Althea answered very quickly. Yes, I studied there. I completed a special program. The doctor looked thoughtful for a moment. Really, he said slowly. That's interesting. I worked with some teachers at Stanford for 5 years, and I don't remember hearing about that program. Augustine suddenly became very still. I could almost feel the moment when something began to break. Augustine slowly turned his head and looked at Althea. Althea, he asked quietly, which professors were in charge of your program? Althea opened her mouth, but no words came out. Magnus quickly stepped forward. "This is ridiculous," he said loudly. "Today is supposed to be a happy day. Why are we talking about this?" Mirabelle gently touched his arm. "Let's not discuss this right now," she said nervously. But Augustine wasn't listening to them anymore. His eyes were still fixed on Althea. "You lied," he said softly. "Did you ever even go to Stanford?" Althea's breathing became fast and shaky. The entire room became very quiet. It felt like the air itself had stopped moving. I did not step forward. I did not interrupt. I only watched. Augustine took a deep breath. "Althea," he said slowly, pointing toward me. "Who is she really? You told me she was unstable. You told me she left the family." Althea suddenly started speaking very quickly. "If I didn't say that, everyone would have looked at her instead of me," she cried. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Suddenly she didn't look angry anymore. She looked like she was falling apart. "She has always been smarter," Althea whispered. "Always. Favored," I repeated quietly. "Althea, they threw me out of the house." The truth was finally spoken out loud. Althea never wanted that truth to be heard, especially not in front of so many people. Magnus rushed forward angrily. "Enough," he shouted. "You will not steal attention from your sister's wedding." I looked at him calmly. "I'm not stealing attention," I said. "I haven't done anything." Augustine turned toward Magnus. "Is it true?" he asked. "Did you kick her out on graduation night?" Magnus' face turned red. "She was ungrateful," he said loudly. "She refused to help at the clinic." "That's not what you told me before," Augustine said quietly. "You told me she left because she could not handle responsibility." Althea squeezed her eyes shut. My heart was beating steadily now. This moment was not about revenge. This moment was about the truth finally being seen. Augustine continued speaking. "The records from your clinic don't match the story Althea told me," he said. "Her name only appears as a receptionist." Mirabelle looked pale. Magnus took a shaky step backward. The story they had built for 11 years was beginning to fall apart. Augustine turned toward me. "And you?" he asked. "Your name appears in the early clinic records. Training logs. Billing emails. Why?" I looked directly at him. "Because I helped run the clinic," I answered calmly. Althea gasped softly. "I didn't think you would remember those things," she whispered. "I remember everything," I replied. There was no anger in my voice. Only the truth. And that truth made everyone in the room look at me. Augustine looked heartbroken. "Why would you hide this from me?" he asked Althea. Tears began to fall down Althea's cheeks. "I didn't want to lose you," she cried. "You lost me the moment you lied," Augustine said quietly. He stepped slightly away from her. People around the room started whispering. Atlas gently pulled on my hand. "Mom," he asked softly, "are you mad at that lady?" I knelt down beside him. "No," I said gently. "I'm not mad. I'm just sad." Atlas nodded seriously. "People shouldn't lie," he said. Augustine slowly walked toward me. "Arden," he said quietly, "how much of what they told me about you was false?" "Most of it," I answered honestly. Magnus suddenly rushed forward again. "Don't listen to her," he shouted. But he stopped speaking when someone else walked into the room. A man had just entered the ballroom. He was from the investigator's office. He had been looking into the strange financial problems at the clinic. I had reported those problems many months earlier. The man looked calm and professional. He did not look angry. He simply walked in and stood quietly. When Magnus saw him, his body became stiff. Mirabelle looked like she might faint. Althea made a small, broken sound. I stayed where I was. I didn't smile. Justice does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it simply walks into a room and waits. Magnus swallowed nervously. "This is a private event," he said. The investigator spoke politely. "I won't disturb the wedding," he said. "I'm only here to deliver some documents about the clinic's billing records. They need to be reviewed soon." He held out an envelope. For a moment, nobody moved. Finally, I stepped forward and took the envelope. But I did not keep it. Instead, I handed it to Magnus. "You should open this," I said softly. The room was so quiet that people could hear the sound of the paper shaking in Magnus' hands. Adrian stepped closer to me. His presence made me feel calm and supported. Atlas leaned against my legs. He could feel that something serious was happening, even if he did not understand everything. Augustine looked at me with a new expression. It was a mixture of respect and regret. Althea slowly sat down in a chair. Her beautiful wedding dress spread around her like a fallen curtain. Her hands were shaking as she stared at everything she had built with lies. I did not feel like I had won. Instead, I felt something else. I felt free. Augustine sighed quietly. You two know each other, he said softly. He had said those same words earlier, but now they meant something very different. I gave a small, gentle smile. Yes, I said. Too well. And now everyone in the room understood what those words meant. The wedding ended quietly. The music stopped, and the celebration slowly faded away. Guests began leaving the ballroom in silence. Some whispered to each other. Some looked shocked. Others looked sad. Adrian drove us home that night. His hand rested gently over mine, making me feel safe in a way my childhood never had. Atlas fell asleep in the back seat, his small breathing soft and peaceful. By the next morning, the investigation into the clinic had become much bigger. I did not try to push it forward. I only answered questions when the investigators asked for old records. I simply told the truth that I had carried alone for many years. The consequences belonged to them now. 1 week later, Augustine contacted me. He did not call to create drama. He only wanted closure. He apologized for believing the story he had been told about me. I accepted his apology. Not because he deserved it, but because I no longer needed anything from the past. Life slowly became peaceful again. My office felt lighter. My garden looked brighter. On weekends, Adrian and Atlas built small model rockets on the patio while I worked on plans for a scholarship fund. The scholarship was meant to help students who had no safety net, students like me. I did not forgive my family, but I did not hate them either. I simply let them become what they had always been, a chapter of my life that I had already moved beyond. Sometimes justice is not loud. Sometimes it is simply the quiet feeling of knowing that you survived. The truth finally caught up with the people who tried to hurt you, and you walked away whole. I built a life they cannot touch. I built a family they cannot rewrite. And I built a future that belongs only to us.